Okay, great. We're ready to call the March 9th meeting of the Economic Development Committee to order. May I have a roll call?
Do we have to do?
For the attendance.
Okay. Councilmember Burns. Here. Member Ogawa. Here. Councilmember Kelly. Here. Councilmember Reed.
Here.
Councilmember Wynn. Here. Councilmember Newsom. Here.
Okay, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Wynn, seconded by Councilmember Newsom. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Moving on to the next item of business. May I have a motion for our first item of business?
Well, we have public comment.
I'm sorry. Well, do we have public comments? We have one person
I
virtual.
have one that's in the ask questions.
Okay, we'll start with that.
Okay, so, can
Hello?
I ask how many people we have, on the call? Can you introduce yourself?
I'm Chantal Healy.
Is there anybody else?
I'm one person, I don't know.
Okay. So, public comment has been called on the agenda. Can you once again introduce yourself and share your comment?
Oh, okay. Good evening. My name is Chantal Michelle Healy. I'm a resident of Evanston. I live at 315 Davis Street, across the street from the lake. And I also serve on the Evanston Arts Council and Public Art Working Group. And I wanted to offer a comment about the Arlington Lagoon building, about the possibility of having the Cafe Arlington located there. I live directly across the street from it. I've always dreamed of seeing something like that there. I think it would create a great sense of community to have a cafe there. It would have a plaza setting. There would be shared space for people to gather by the lake that is not expensive. It would be outdoors, so that would be safe, particularly if there are any more pandemics or if any new variants come back. It's equitable. All people of different socioeconomic backgrounds can enjoy this beautiful setting and have a cup of tea, a glass of water, or a glass of wine. It would not be a privilege for the rich, but for everyone in the community. It's humanitarian. The lake needs a place that provides food and water to those who are thirsty or dehydrated, or in need of food after a long walk around the lake, and we don't have any such resources available. This would prevent people from having to leave the area to find food. It would instill a sense of pride and ownership among all the residents of Evanston to bring their friends to sit by a lake. And it would help the economy and help our businesses. It may drive more people to come and visit Evanston, increase tourism, which then could help our businesses in the city. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else on the phone?
Is there anybody else on the call that would like to make a public comment?
Okay, and then I know there's a written public comment. Right.
Yeah, I mean,
Sure.
if I could read it. Okay, this is from Jeremy Donata at 309 Davis Street. I am writing you in support of a full-service cafe at the north end of Arlington Lagoon. As a first ward member and close neighbor to the lagoon, 309 Davis, I have watched the pandemic decimate many of our downtown businesses, especially the small boutiques that have made Evanston so special. In that time, Wilmette, Winneck, and Highland Park have all surpassed Evanston as North Shore destinations. Evanston is blessed to have a long stretch of beaches, the most used amenity in the city in the summer, and one well used in the winter as well. However, to spend much time there, you have to pack a lunch or snacks, and there is a no alcohol policy. What if we had a destination, somewhere to go to get a hot meal or warm snack or a beverage? A real cafe, as opposed to a beverage cart that is there with Gatorades and chips, would draw people as a destination, not just someone looking to quench their thirst. It would be a meeting place and a happy hour destination. It would be classy and suit the needs of many of the needies who oppose food trucks. A true outdoor cafe would be a place people could bring their pets and eat safely and outdoors. They could come after a walk or a swim to build community. Watch the boats land in and out, watch their kids play around the lagoon, and feed the dogs until their meals are ready. Perhaps the cafe would sell dog food for that purpose, and people would stop feeding them bread. Boaters could grab a meal before they head out on the water, or eat something good upon their return, as there is nowhere to park a boat except right there. This cafe would draw people from Chicago and the surrounding North Shore suburbs. Maybe it would sell a few more beach tokens from out-of-towners. After all, it is easier to head to Evanston for a day at the beach if you don't have to park 3 times, at the beach, downtown for lunch, and then at the beach again. I have 2 teenagers and a daughter almost turned 21. They all admit that there are very few places for them in Evanston. They go to the beach, they hang out on the rocks, and they mill around in downtown. When the movie theater closed, they moved to Fountain Square. I think if they had the Arrington Lagoon Cafe, they would come and eat, spend their parents' money, and have a safe place to congregate away from traffic and off the rocks. For too long, our lakefront has sat as a dormant resource, underutilized. Let's get excited about having one thing there that is not built of sand, that is a destination. Chair.
Thank you. All right, that concludes public comment. So let us move on to our agenda, and that brings us up to our first item for consideration, which is the Arrington Lagoon Building and Lakefront Concession Request for Letters of Intent. Do you have a motion on that?
I'll make the motion, Mr. Chair.
Second.
A second motion by Councilmember Diesema, seconded by Councilmember Kelly. Do you want to start off with staff?
Sure, thank you, Chairperson Reed. There's not a formal presentation. What I wanted to stress, well, 2 things. One, just a correction on the agenda. There's a paragraph that's out of place that suggests that there's some $50,000 in tax increment financing. This is unrelated to the Arrington Lagoon. The page formatted in a weird way. This should be under item E, which is tax increment financing for Custer Avenue. So I want to make that clear for the record that there is not any TIF money being directed to the lagoon. And then while there isn't a formal presentation, what I wanted to point out is that this is something we brought to the committee prior to the pandemic, and we were ready to launch, and of course the world changed, and we didn't have the resources over time to proceed with it. Although I can't do it on our end.
You can have it down. You don't want to mute us.
Yeah, I don't want to mute us.
Yes, that's fine.
So, what I wanted to point out was that the action tonight is giving staff the authority to issue the RFP, or we're calling it a request for letters of intent. The idea here is now we're not asking for people to give us a proposal. We know what we want to see there. We want a high quality food experience, and what we're saying is, if you're hopefully an Evanston-based restaurateur who has an idea about how to operate a cafe, you send us a letter of intent that spells out how much you pay for the space, your hours of operation, your intended menus, and things like that. We've outlined that in the RFP, and we have updated. And forgive me when I say RFP, it's essentially acting as an RFP. We've updated it to remove the request that I believe it was Councilmember Reed who asked that we focus on the building only and not try to make it a broader lakefront food operation. As staff, I think we're really comfortable with that. Let's focus on one thing at a time. I don't necessarily know if we're ready for the entire lakefront. I'll leave that up to the city council. But the idea here again is to focus on delivering an elevated food experience in that building with the hours that would be depending on the operation of the restaurant. We're going to have an opportunity to review their requests or their proposals. I'm going to leave it at that because I think you all understand what we're trying to accomplish, and we're available for questions. One other correction in the RFP, we said that we would do a site visit on March 8th, which is today. that was assuming that we were having this approved 2 weeks ago. So we'll update the document to reflect the date that we're going to do a site visit. Probably if we're given authority to move forward today, we'll do that next week or the week after. I also want to point one last thing out. There isn't a requirement of the city council that we come forward to ask for a committee to issue something like this, but because of the sensitivity of the lakefront, we want to make sure that it was vetted. I mean, I think we've gone through a significant vetting process amongst this group of elected officials, the prior group and this group. And I just wanted to point that out. This is an opportunity to hear from the representatives who represent constituents in the city. Finished. Thank you.
Councilmember Nguyen, and then Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Paul, I wanted to ask about, and I've read this several times, that my concern over the years have been commercialization of the lakefront, and that a full-service restaurant comes with a full-service alley presence of a grease barrel, deliveries, recycling, all of those things that come along. And so what my understanding of this is that we aren't looking at a flat iron restaurant. This is going to have food warming, maybe light food prep. So could you describe to what extent what we're looking for?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, from our perspective, from staff's perspective, we don't know what the market will bear in this site. We've outlined what is on site, which is a very minimal kind of prep warming kitchen.
Yeah.
So one approach could be that a restaurateur does all the food off-site and then brings it into the space, keeps it warm, or does some, I think there's, Ms. Bowden, do you recall if there's an oven in the space? I don't recall.
There is not.
There's nothing. So, you know,
There isn't even a warming.
so the idea here is that they would have to invest in that facility. We're not likely going to invest in any equipment. The operator would have to do that, or there would be some negotiation.
So that's,
Yes.
so, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but, so that means, but are we, I couldn't support a full-service restaurant coming in and saying, we're gonna have, an industrial restaurant quality kitchen that has all of the things that any number of restaurants don't have.
I have an answer for that. I predict that that's nearly an impossibility based on the space. The kitchen space in the building is really small. So I think what could happen is the food, the restaurant quality food as you described it is cooked elsewhere and then it's brought into a warming oven that is brought in by the operator.
I understand that.
And there will not be black iron because the building's just not equipped for that.
Okay. So, I think,
Can I respond to your question
Yeah.
there as well? For food vendors, the health department has a number of license classifications, and I'm trying to find it, but I know there's, type 1 through 3, I believe.
Yeah.
And I think what Councilmember Nguyen is describing would be,
type 1.
I think, yeah, type 1.
No, that is what I'm
Yeah.
describing. Yeah, somewhat, but type 2.
Type 2 also might be within what you would accept.
Yeah, I mean, type 1 is sit-down waiter service.
Oh.
But actually, what I'm describing is more like food.
I don't want to assume I'm figuring out that you're concerned about perhaps a full-fledged kitchen with black iron that is pumping grease and smells and odors and the waste associated with that.
Yeah.
And the logistics of where is that stored. I believe that we're going to have the opportunity when we see the responses that when people walk the space, they see how large it is, that that's not going to be the case.
Yeah.
But we also have an opportunity if we don't like that kind of proposal that we're not, as a group, going to select.
Okay. Yeah, I have one or two other questions. Do we have anything in here, and I'm just realizing this now, that requires, is seeking someone who's eco-friendly, uses, recycles, make sure they use materials that as eco-friendly as possible?
I think we need to add that.
Okay, I would like to add that, because that's becoming much more affordable for restaurants now, and especially because it's on the lakefront, they're really emphasizing park right now. Then my other point is, how long is the park program, summer program, going to be happening there?
Right, so,
How does that square with having the cafe there?
right, so Councilmember Nguyen is referencing the arts and
What are the arts counts
there's
there?
the second, they're calling it the arts and aquatics camp.
Oh,
And
okay,
I'm gonna find this for you. There's, we've asked that that in year one, this year, that there's a plan to coexist with the camp and figure out how that works. Their hours, according to previous director, Hemingway, was 8:30 to 1:30, and it's outlined in the proposal. But and so the idea would be that we would swap out. However, I am going to have a conversation with interim director Thompson, and CEO several, and to discuss if that is a fixed requirement, if there's a way that we can, if there's another way to consider storing things, or so I want to make sure that at a minimum that we think about an alternative so there isn't a conflict. But the way that it's presented today is that the hours are they kind of dovetail, right? One ends at 1:30, and then we figured that there would be. But again, if there's somebody that wants to do a lunch program, you've got to figure that out.
And the camp is only during the week.
It's only during weekends.
and usually there are two sessions, a morning and afternoon.
Right. So,
They're doing something else for the afternoon.
yeah, presented to me was that the space, that they use the internal space for whatever it is that they do, the tables in that windowed space, I'll point it, you all know it,
Yeah.
this area. And so ideally, we have a single user using the space. Again, because we're transitioning from this COVID world into wherever we are today, which is still a COVID world, let's not kid ourselves. But we decided that we should really try to move forward. We think that this would be a good use during the summer, and they already have the space occupied just in that glass space.
Okay, my only other comment is, this year we have ice skating, but in prior years, ice skating is no longer reliably available there because of temperature. So it would be lovely. I mean, I certainly know people who grew up here in the 40s where the key to that building was passed around among neighbors, and that you just go and knock on the door, and apparently the neighbor would go and give you the key, and you give it back after you were done ice skating. So sweeter, simpler world. So yeah. Okay, that's it.
Councilman Raquel, and then you.
Actually, I had a question.
So I just want to say, I think this is really a possibility that can truly enhance our lakefront experience as well as the Evanston experience. I think I'm glad that we decided just to focus just on this one location as opposed to making it more expansive. I think if we continue, and I say if because this will only proceed with very close communication and participation with residents who surround, well, everybody and anybody who's interested, but absolutely with community involvement because for some of the reasons that why this hasn't happened in the past. So I'm glad that we're just going to focus on one. I think, again, if we do get this off the ground, I think we want to make sure this is done right, and I think it can be just an absolutely beautiful experience. And in terms of some of the things that Councilmember Nguyen mentioned, I would like to see us work out, assuming if we do go forward, that maybe the establishment would contract with the city for garbage removal and this sort of thing, so that we can ensure that it's really absolutely kept tip-top clean. So rather than relying, on Andy, I'd like to see the city handling that component. So yeah, I think this is very interesting. It would really be just a delightful addition to Evanston and our neighborhoods.
Thank you.
And I agree with proper verb as opposed to
Yes.
Did you say proper for food?
Yes, because people
Yes.
throw despite our sign saying, please don't give them the red.
Well, someone gave me a nice business idea, I thought maybe I'll.
Is it bad for their health or?
Oh, yeah.
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 Are there other, I'm just curious, are there other arrangements like this in the city? I assume this is like in the state city. And how much income does it generate right now?
I don't have an answer to that. I know they rent it out or at least lease it out for weddings and things like that. I've seen that, but I don't know if there's a revenue stream for that or if it's just getting a permit, so there might be a small permit.
But then in terms of this would be like, would part of it be how much money would be extracted? From
I
this?
don't know. We're gonna have, this is what the letters of intent are intended to solicit bids, really. So like if somebody is interested, they're gonna say, we're gonna pay X dollars of rent during this period of time. Or they're gonna say, we're gonna pay zero because we want to test, like, we don't know yet. We're gonna, I would suggest that there is definitely a way to monetize the space. Because we're also talking about the patio. We're talking about electrifying it or at least having solar lights that have the trees lit up. So there's some costs associated with it, and, we have to offset them. So at its base, it's really not designed to be a revenue generator. It's designed to be a way to enhance quality of life.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah,
I would just hate to see it become like this fabulously good revenue generator, and it's like,
and it's not generating.
well, because they just got a great deal, and someone that's building it.
Well, we'll only give them a 1-year lease.
Okay.
I'm not, by the way, I'm not,
Yeah.
we have an economist on our,
I always hate it when there's like something given away, like,
yeah,
and someone does really well,
right.
and then it's just like they make a killing. I don't know, that would make me kind
Our
Our intent
here, our intent here is to, we believe we'll capitalize on sales tax and beer and wine sales will generate liquor tax. And I really believe we need to pick a proposal that has some of the minds for the space. I don't know what we'll receive in responses, so let's wait and see. Now, one last thing I'll add, if I may. We believe that this is the easiest one to start with. When we did this 2 years ago, we had also included the Clark Street beach and they call it a vending concession stand, right? There's a space in there. And then we also considered bringing in James Park concessions and then we're going to move forward soon with the Robert Crown concession stand. We were focused on the Robert Crown and this Barrington building as kind of a dual release back in January of 2019. There's a lot of, by the way, there's a lot of interest in that Robert Crown space. And when we talked about this, it generated a lot more excitement. So we actually showed this.
of. And this would seem like an amazing opportunity.
So we want to get done.
I mean, there was a concession stand here for a really long time that sold like ice cream, soda, things like that. And it was at it didn't use the beautiful old window section. It was at the other end.
Right, I mean, we've never had any, so.
Councilman Newsman, then.
So our intent is to sell, wine and beer on the patio. So we'll need to amend the liquor code to allow that to happen. Is there a classification that already exists for this establishment, or is that just another
For
procedural step we have
I
to
think
do?
we had to create one, because otherwise, for like, at the Levy Center, I think you bought a 1-day license.
We would probably have to create a new license, and I don't think we could call this like an event and have a summertime. It just feels like that's what we
Right,
use.
right.
So I think you're right. So we'll make sure to define that process.
If there's nothing else, then I will, go ahead, Councilman.
Is there anything that says the size of it, what's the square footage? The floor plan of it?
There isn't a floor plan. It's really a small space.
I'm gonna guess, Bonnie, 1,000 square feet,
Yeah.
if that.
And the black, what we talking about, black, some metal, or what, I just want to understand the size. What is that?
Black iron means they're frying and cooking things there.
They're frying and cooking things.
And it requires ventilation.
Right, the business at Church and Dodge, the one that you've helped,
Yeah.
navigate process. And all that hood that they talk about is really, the term is black iron, so it's strong enough to withhold the grease and
Okay.
the high heat.
Councilman Williams, your concern is the grease more than anything. It's-
So my concern is that it's a full-service restaurant, because you know, Councilor Reed, if you go around the back of any restaurant in Evanston, there is a grease barrel, there is garbage, there's a lot of other stuff that is, back of the house belongs in the alley. There is no alley around this building. I mean, all sides of it are beautiful, all sides of it have patio around it. So my concern is that that we have a light footprint here, if we do something. It's a beautiful space. I've been out there a lot during the Starlight concert. So my concern is, you know, good food that is warmed there, that takes advantage of the site, that has a light footprint.
Because my thinking is that even if they're not using grease, it can produce a lot of waste.
Right, and that's
It
my
could end up
point.
being, so that's what I'm trying to really identify what your concern is. If it is the amount of people, if the thought is that if they're not using grease, they're not gonna produce enough food and therefore they won't attract as many people, then that's one thing, but what is
So my point
If
is
they're
that,
cooking off-site,
They're
then all the
cooking off-site.
packaging, all of the leftover ends of green beans or whatever are not in this location.
so, you know, any,
It's like a catering
Yeah.
presence really more than anything.
because once again, there is no, there is no back of the house here, there's no alley. And so if we're gonna have, I appreciate that people wanna have a light meal on the lakefront, with a glass of wine or beer, which means I'm really taking giant steps forward and I'm doing this.
They can just dump the trash in the lake.
Right, but, so I appreciate that, it's a beautiful building.
So are we saying in our request for what is it, RFL or whatever,
If you,
The
yeah,
RFP.
LOI.
LOI, are we saying that they can't prep at the location? Is that specifically been stated?
Some degree of permit.
Because some of what you described, again, can still happen on site
I
unless
know.
we explicitly tell them they can't
right,
do
so
it.
it's in there.
It's in there?
here in
Okay.
terms of, it's a warming kitchen, for legislative history purposes, I am discussing this here at this economic development committee meeting to say that what I could support is something that, as is described here, that we make sure that someone, I mean, if somebody comes in and says, we're gonna have fancy restaurant here, full service, and that's not what I think we're talking about.
I have a specific memory, just regular trash collection. I remember running down that, right around that exact spot, and there's like a full trash truck. And it's like we're head on at like 7 in the morning.
Right.
This is
So
part
I
of the experience
think
that I want to be having
Councilmember
right now.
Clay's point is excellent, that, you know, whoever we have operate this, you know, we have tight requirements like we do with a lot of our restaurants, that you pick up your trash, you pick up everybody else's trash within 250 feet. And that we make sure that, because it's our lakefront, that you know, you empty your trash at the frequency that we tell you.
But but what you're saying though, your belief is that that restaurants would produce more waste.
Well, I think what you're saying, I know, for example, I live along Howard Street, a lot of restaurants, and I'm near the alley where Peckish Pig, a nice, beautiful restaurant is, and good to go, and you walk through the alley, and there's this tub, it's like it's a big, like, trash bin, and it's where they dump the grease, and quite often that stuff spills all
I
out.
understand, but then that's just the grease. But what if somebody cooks with fire? Right, just fire, wood burn, fire, stove. They got a new concept. There's restaurants out there that do that.
Well, I mean,
Would that still be an issue?
I don't know, let's see
Right,
if they come
okay.
back.
But I just want to understand is both for this and also for future conversations, because I think we
Yeah.
often have this, it's too broad, we need to really narrow in about what we're specifically concerned about so that we can measure it. Is it the amount of waste?
But,
You know, is it the grease?
I'll know it when I see it.
Well, I was gonna suggest,
we need
I was
to
gonna
plan
suggest that
better.
like specifically to make this, how are you gonna get rid of your trash?
Yeah.
Part of the,
And we don't want to do sterile, you know, and Devon is absolutely right. And what happens is all restaurants recycle their grease, but it's not until that barrel is full. And that doesn't, you know, and sometimes the recycling doesn't come around as often as you like.
And saying you can cook on site if you don't produce grease.
Bobby, I don't know how to run a restaurant. I'm gonna find, we're gonna see
I
what
think
happens.
this conversation might be kind of moot
Yeah.
because there's only space there for a warming kitchen.
Well, that's why I asked, you know.
Right,
what
which
size
means they're doing the work with the grease or no grease or with the chopping, with the cutting, throwing away the packages, the fish comes in. That is all somewhere else. They prepare it, they transport it to the lagoon, they plate it there. So there's, limited prep there.
Potential,
not-
potential.
Can I jump to,
Potential.
can I jump to Paul? Paul?
Thank you. Just to answer your question about the size, I measured it on the map. It's around 1,200 square feet, the whole building. A third of it is,
The
third or half
kitchen
of it
is only the,
right, the third or half of it is the public space. And the bathroom takes up a remaining 2/3 of what remains, and then there's like a sliver.
How big is Gibbs?
It's much, Gibbs is bigger.
well, no, I think he's talking about the kitchen.
Right, just the kitchen, because they're not using any other space to
The
prep and
kitchen
do all
in
the
Gibbs
stuff.
is like,
Like 200
Small.
square feet.
is way more than that could even fit in this space.
Oh, really? Is this,
Yeah,
that's
it's like a
small?
refrigerator.
Even the just the kitchen this is not the similar size?
It's like a refrigerator, a countertop, and you could fit a warming thing in there.
This is
Like
super
it's
small.
a rack. And I
Well, when you do the
remember
walkthrough,
3 years ago, we
let me
took
know. I'd like to
photos of
see
the
it.
interior of the space. I don't know how to get that to you right now, but,
When you do the walkthrough, let me know,
Yeah.
I'll pop over.
okay, yeah.
Oh,
That's it.
I'm not even sure we still rent it for weddings, you know, or that people even use it. I know the Rose Garden is used a lot. I'm not sure that this is. Go ahead.
Yeah, go.
okay, I just wanted to, I had a few things I wanted to very quickly bring up. I sent Councilmember Wet, maybe we're not gonna figure out the grease trap question now, so maybe it's moot. But I have this risk category thing here from the health department, and it seems as though what we're really looking for is something very similar to what we already allow with the lakefront, which is mobile food, or almost like a push cart. The same thing that a push cart peddler would be able to operate is essentially what we're saying could operate here at this facility. And so that's a category 2 or 3. And I'll send this to everybody, I'm not gonna go over it now. And then, I'm glad that, Paul, you clarified that, we're just talking about this spot here, not someone managing an entire lakefront operation. And I'm sorry, how soon do you think that, when does the beach season start?
I put it it's around, call it Memorial Day to Labor Day, but there's,
More than May?
it's, sorry, yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Probably mid-May to end of September is kind of the time frame.
okay. Okay, I think we're ready to vote on this. I'd like to, see this, let's try to move on this. I think that the fee that someone should pay is similar again to the push cart license fee or the mobile food vendor fee. And of course, whatever that I think. Okay, great. We're ready to call the March 9th meeting of the Economic Development Committee to order. May I have a roll call?
Do we have to do?
For the attendance.
Councilmember Burns,
Here.
Member Ogawa,
Here.
Councilmember Kelly.
Here.
Councilmember Reed,
Here.
Councilmember Wynn. Here. Councilmember Newsom.
Here.
Okay, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Councilmember Wen, seconded by Councilmember Newsma. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Moving on to the next item of business. May I have a motion for our first item of business?
Well, we have public comment.
I'm sorry, well, do we have public comments? We have one person
I have
virtually.
one that's in the lead asking.
Okay, we'll start with
Okay,
it.
so, can
Hello?
I ask how many people we have on the call? Can you introduce yourself?
I'm Chantal Healy.
Is there anybody
I'm
else?
one person, I don't know.
Okay. So, public comment has been called on the agenda. Can you once again introduce yourself and share your comment?
Oh, okay. Good evening. My name is Chantal Healy. I'm a resident of Evanston. I live at 315 Davis Street, across the street from the lake. And I also serve on the Evanston Arts Council and Public Art Working Group. And I wanted to offer a comment about the Arlington Lagoon building, possibly about the possibility of having the Cafe Arlington located there. I live directly across the street from it. I've always dreamed of seeing something like that there. I think it would create a great sense of community to have a cafe there. It would have a plaza setting. There would be shared space for people to gather by the lake that is not expensive. It would be outdoors, so that would be safe, particularly if there are any more pandemics or if the pandemic any new variants come back. It's equitable. All people of different socioeconomic backgrounds can enjoy this beautiful setting and have a cup of tea, a glass of water, or a glass of wine. It would not be privileged for the rich, but for everyone in the community. It's humanitarian. The lake needs a place that provides food and water to those who are thirsty or dehydrated, or in need of food after a long walk around the lake, and we don't have any such resources available. This would prevent people from having to leave the area to find food. It would instill a sense of pride and ownership among all the residents of Evanston to bring their friends to sit by a lake. And it would help the economy and help our businesses. It may drive more people to come and visit Evanston, increase tourism, which then could help our businesses in the city. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else on the phone?
Is there anybody else on the call that would like to make a public comment?
Okay, and then I know there's a written public comment. Right.
Yeah, I mean,
Sure.
if I could read it. Okay, this is from Jeremy Vanetta at 309 Davis Street. I am writing you in support of a full-service cafe at the north end of Arlington Lagoon. As a first ward member and close neighbor to the lagoon, 309 Davis, I have watched the pandemic decimate many of our downtown businesses, especially the small boutiques that have made Evanston so special. In that time, Wilmette, Winneck, and Highland Park have all surpassed Evanston as North Shore destinations. Evanston is blessed to have a long stretch of beaches, the most used amenity in the city in the summer, and one well used in the winter as well. However, to spend much time there, you have to pack a lunch or snacks, and there is a no alcohol policy. What if we had a destination, somewhere to go to get a hot meal or warm snack or a beverage? A real cafe, as opposed to a beverage cart that is there with Gatorade and chips, would draw people as a destination, not just someone looking to quench their thirst. It would be a meeting place and a happy hour destination. It would be classy and suit the needs of many of the NIMBYs who opposed food trucks. A true outdoor cafe would be a place people could bring their pets and eat safely and outdoors. They could come after a walk or a swim to build community. Watch the boats land in and out, watch their kids play around the lagoon, and feed the dogs until their meals are ready. Perhaps the cafe would sell dog food for that purpose, and people would stop feeding them bread. Boaters could grab a meal before they head out on the water, or eat something good upon their return, as there is nowhere to park a boat except right there. This cafe would draw people from Chicago and the surrounding North Shore suburbs. Maybe it would sell a few more beach tokens from out-of-towners. After all, it is easier to head to Evanston for a day at the beach if you don't have to park 3 times at the beach, downtown for lunch, and then at the beach again. I have 2 teenagers and a daughter almost 21. They all admit that there are very few places for them in Evanston. They go to the beach, They hang out on the rocks and they mill around in downtown. When the movie theater closed, they moved to Fountain Square. I think if they had the Arrington Lagoon Cafe, they would come and eat, spend their parents' money, and have a safe place to congregate away from traffic and off the rocks. For too long, our lakefront has sat as a dormant resource, underutilized. Let's get excited about having one thing there that is not built of sand, that is a destination. Chair.
Thank you. All right, that concludes public comment. So let us move on to our agenda, and that brings us up to our first item for consideration, which is the Arrington Lagoon Building and Lakefront Concession Request for letters of intent. May I have a motion on that?
I'll make the motion, Mr. Chair.
Second.
A second motion by Councilmember Leesma, seconded by Councilmember Kelly. Do you want to start off with staff?
Sure, thank you, Chairperson Reed. There's not a formal presentation. What I wanted to stress, well, two things. One, just a correction on the agenda. There's a paragraph that's on place that suggests that there's some $50,000 in tax increment financing. This is unrelated to the Arrington Lagoon. The page formatted in a weird way. This should be under item E, which is tax increment financing for Custer Avenue. So I want to make that clear for the record that there is not any TIF money being directed to the lagoon. And then while there isn't a formal presentation, what I wanted to point out is that this is something we brought to the committee prior to the pandemic, and we were ready to launch. And of course, the world changed, and we didn't have the resources at the time to proceed with it. Although I can't continue on our own.
You can jog down. You don't want to mute us.
Yeah, I don't want to mute us.
Yes, that's fine.
So, what I wanted to point out was that the action tonight is giving staff the authority to issue the RFP, or we're calling it a request for letters of intent. The idea here is now we're not asking for people to give us a proposal. We know what we want to see there. We want a high quality food experience, and what we're saying is, if you're hopefully an Evanston-based restaurateur who has an idea about how to operate the cafe, you send us a letter of intent that spells out how much you pay for the space, your hours of operation, your intended menus, and things like that. We've outlined that in the RFP, and we have updated. And forgive me when I say RFP, it's essentially acting as an RFP. We've updated it to remove the request that I believe it was Councilmember Reed who asked that we focus on the building only and not try to make it a broader lakefront food operation. As staff, I think we're really comfortable with that. Let's focus on one thing at a time. I don't necessarily know if we're ready for the entire lakefront. I'll leave that up to the city council. But the idea here again is to focus on delivering an elevated food experience in that building with the hours that would be depending on the operation of the restaurant. We're going to have an opportunity to review their requests or their proposals. I'm going to leave it at that because I think you all understand what we're trying to accomplish, and we're available for questions. One other correction in the RFP, we said that we would do a site visit on March 8th, which is today. That was assuming that we were having this approved 2 weeks ago. So we'll update the document to reflect the date that we're going to do a site visit. Probably if we're given authority to move forward today, we'll do that next week or the week after. I also want to point one last thing out. There isn't a requirement of the city council that we come forward to ask for a committee to issue something like this, but because of the sensitivity of the lakefront, we wanted to make sure that it was vetted. I mean, I think we've gone through a significant vetting process amongst this group of elected officials, the prior group and this group. And I just wanted to point that out. This is an opportunity to hear from the representatives who represent constituents in the city. finished, thank you.
Councilmember Nguyen, and then Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Paul, I wanted to ask about, and I've read this several times, that my concerns over the years have been commercialization of the lakefront, and that a full-service restaurant comes with a full-service alley, presence of a grease barrel, deliveries, recycling, all of those things that come along. And so what my understanding is that we aren't looking at a black iron restaurant. This is going to have food warming, maybe light prep, food prep. So could you describe to what extent what we're looking for?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, from our perspective, from staff's perspective, we don't know what the market will bear in this site. We've outlined what is on site, which is a very minimal kind of prep warming kitchen.
Yeah.
So one approach could be that a restaurateur does all the food off-site and then brings it into the space, keeps it warm, or does some, I think there's, Ms. Bowden, do you recall if there's an oven in the space? I don't recall.
There is not.
There's nothing. So, you know,
There isn't even a warming.
so the idea here is that they would have to invest in that facility. We're not likely going to invest in any equipment. The operator would have to do that, or there would be some negotiation.
So there's,
Yes.
so I'm sorry to interrupt you, but so that means, but are we, I couldn't support a full service restaurant coming in and saying, we're gonna have, an industrial restaurant quality kitchen that has all of the things that any number of our restaurants don't.
I have an answer for that. I predict that that's nearly an impossibility based on the space. The kitchen space in the building is really small. So I think what could happen is the restaurant quality food as you described it is cooked elsewhere and then it's brought into a warming oven that is brought in by the operator.
Okay, I understand that.
And there will not be black iron because the building's just not equipped for that.
Okay, so
Can I respond to your question
Yeah.
there as well? For food vendors, the health department has a number of license classifications, and I'm trying to find it, but I know there's, type 1 through 3, I believe,
Yeah.
and I think what Councilmember Nguyen is describing would be,
type 1.
I think, yeah, type 1.
No, that is what I'm
Yeah.
describing. Yeah, somewhat, but type 2.
Type 2 also might be within what you would accept.
Yeah, I mean, type 1 is sit down waiter service,
Oh.
but actually what I'm describing is more like food.
I don't want to assume I'm figuring out that you're concerned about perhaps a full-fledged kitchen with black iron that is pumping grease and smells and odors and the waste associated with that.
Yeah.
And the logistics of where is that stored. I believe that we're going to have the opportunity when we see the responses that when people walk the space, they see how large it is, that that's not going to be the case.
Yeah.
But we also have an opportunity if we don't like that kind of proposal that we're not, as a group, going to select.
Okay. Yeah, I have one or two other questions. Do we have anything in here, and I'm just realizing this now, that is seeking someone who's eco-friendly, uses, recycles, make sure they use materials that are as eco-friendly as possible?
I think we need to add that.
Okay, I would like to add that, because that's becoming much more affordable for restaurants now, and especially because it's on the lakefront, they're really emphasizing park right now. Then my other point is, how long is the park summer program going to be happening here?
Right. So
How does that square with having the cafe there?
right. So Councilmember Nguyen is referencing the arts and
What are the arts camps
there's
there?
the second. They're calling it the arts and aquatics camp.
Oh,
And
okay.
I'm going to find this for you. We've asked that in year one, this year, that there's a plan to coexist with the camp and figure out how that works. Their hours, according to previous director Hemingway, was 8:30 to 1:30, and it's outlined in the proposal. But and so the idea would be that we would swap out. However, I am going to have a conversation with.
36,000.
And then, are we still doing this, or we have a different way of doing things now that the market has shifted, or we're in a different place? Like, are we still doing loans in this?
We don't have we have, there's a CDBG loan, revolving loan fund that we partner with community development on. So, and I don't know what the balance of that is.
We can support businesses with that too.
We can, yeah, it's a small number though. I don't even know if there's a balance in it now because during COVID, we did a bunch of little loans or grants. But yes, the short answer to that is yes. And we could also do an offline, like, deep dive on this if you want to as well. We can add that to our
Or bring it
agenda.
back to committee.
Say that again?
Or bring it back to committee if
I
folks
can
are
bring it up
interested.
to next committee, but the other thing is, we try to use our TIP districts as the funding sources for these types of loans because they're geared toward fixing the leasehold improvements. So for example, if Little Beans is not a TIP, but if Good to Go goes, there's somebody else that can rotate in, and it's the same thing with the chicken and waffles, right? Like somebody's able to take it over. That's why we always tie it to, almost all of our programs tie to leasehold improvements. You're fixing the asset and improves the taxation on it, and improves the usability of it. We're giving it for operations, and we do a little bit of operational, we don't even lend on this, but we give the small grant for like point of sale, like entrepreneurship grant, right? Point of sale systems or that's just seed money, right? This is more about like investing in the space, and it also helps businesses that are likely not going to get lending. We always check in with the banks, by the way, as well. Can you participate in this before we invest in it? Banks do not want to invest at all in food businesses. And I'm not as familiar with the Little Beans deal, and I know you're not asking just specifically about these. But places like Malik Turley's Hip Circle Empowerment Center, a bank is not going to.
Yeah, no, that's my line of questions. So, and then the last one on this is, because I understand the program typically is, like, we give up to a certain percentage, so did we loan up to a certain
Right,
percentage,
so-
so did we do the
Right,
whole
so
75?
Notice how Hip Circle and Good to Go both had 25,000 as their loan amount, and that was because the storefront modernization program had a ceiling of a $50,000. So if it's a $50,000, it's a match, right? It's 50% up to $50,000. So if you have a $50,000 investment, this loan would have been for $25,000. Again, for example, if it's a $25,000 project, we would have wanted $12,500. The point is,
So we did loan up to 50% of what they need.
right, and it was just designed as a way to, we had a citywide storefront modernization grant program where we said, and I think this is how Little Beans was involved. If you're east of Ridge or east of Asbury, we would help you with retail only. Like if you're gonna open up a retail shop, because we're trying to motivate retail to happen in vacant storefronts. And we were unsuccessful. Because the market is so strongly against retail right now that nobody took us up on that offer. But west of Asbury, we were willing to fund any project, not any project, but projects that fit the zoning and likewise. So that's why we were able to get restaurants on Howard Street. And again, an experiential business on Asbury, and we don't get was one of the reasons we funded that. We weren't doing that for restaurants east of Asbury because the market was taking care of itself. And the restaurants are tripping over themselves to open and not missing any time.
That's cool.
So-
Thank you.
In terms of like if we invest in businesses or give them these loans, is there any sort of clawback? Let's say if some business we can let, $100,000 loan to sort of general build out, but they fail, and instead of just do we have any sort of measure, like, I don't know, I know little pieces, I have students who work there, and I know Good to Go, I'm not familiar with the circle, but if there were a business that we invested, do we have anything in place, like?
Yes. Yeah, so, sometimes it's case by case based on the deal, but when there's a program, we have a program agreement that you define clawback provisions in them. I'd have to determine, going back and researching these, and I'd be glad to do that for the whole committee, so you understand how these were analyzed and negotiated. But sometimes they're done in a way where there's a burn-off period, like if you are open for a period of 5 years, it kind of, like, the clawback disappears, right? Or we say if you fail within 1 year, you owe us 75%, or whatever number we come up with, right? But I'd have to look at these programs.
And each one of these would have that. I mean, I'm all about,
Yes, each of
I'm all
these have
about
a-
pumping money into any businesses that are thriving. But the idea of, like, waiving loans if there's businesses year after year after year, they're, because they're just not, they're not making it and they're not gonna make it, and I'd love to see how that works.
Okay, I'll add two more things really quickly, if you don't mind, Chair. One is, there are often times where if there is a bank as one of the sources of funds, which is rare because they wouldn't be coming to us if they could get bank money, we often will have to take a second position because the bank has that leverage. So, like, if there's money left after the bank takes over, that's rare. We haven't, again, I think really the only failure is the chicken restaurant. I don't keep bringing that up. And then there are cases, I'll leave it there.
Unless they own the property.
Sure, Councilmember Wynn?
So, I mean, another point to add is that, with these programs, for instance, if it's a leasehold interest, we have requested that they go to their landlord first. A number of these things say, you need to improve the air conditioning. Have you talked to your landlord? To what extent can your landlord do this? A lot of times, these are very small landlords who don't have the ability to do it either. So what we're doing, as Paul was saying, is give these loans that we are for leasehold improvements. Over the years, we don't improve, we don't loan for things that the business owner can then remove from the business and take someplace else. It's all fixtures and improving the renting, the leasehold itself. So, and
I have one other clarification, I promise. We also record, we also do a recording, recorder of deeds of, there's a commercial statement that we document what we've kind of invested in or feel. Like, for example, I forgot about one. Patisserie Quarterly opened in your ward. They failed miserably.
yes.
Okay. But we had the clawback provision and also recorded against the property a list of all of the furniture and equipment. And while we didn't get all of our back rent, we were able to keep his entire restaurant became ours, which isn't necessarily an easy thing for a city to manage because we have a hard time managing the assets we have as is. But on the flip side, the new business, which I promise you is opening soon, I toured both their Dempster location and Howard Street, they're able to use some of that equipment. So again, it helps to have these provisions.
Are these all thriving, all three? I mean,
I think if I were judging
I don't know if thrive is the right word. I
No.
mean, are they all surviving through the pandemic?
they've survived, I would say one of the three is thriving, two are mediocre.
Well, Hip Circle is in person, I mean, a lot, so much of that is hip, I know literally, and it's part of the power of a business is for self, and so, I like to just, I look at her and thinking, okay, we all need to be getting back face to face in order to get that forward.
Because we're in big small town America, I ran into Shannon, the owner of Obian's at Target one day, and she was saying like she's muddling through. I mean, bringing a bunch of kids into a space where there's a lot of confusion about masks and all the things, it's.
Yeah, lastly, to close this out, I'll say, I would like to have a discussion about the loan program overall. That's certainly not what's on the table here, of course. I am interested in the future. We gave them the loan, we're deferring, it's fine, but I do in the future, I'm curious to see if we can set better parameters. Like, for example, Hip Circle, I don't think they bring in really any sales tax because they don't have any sales, and so other than, and also we're talking a lot about folks going to the leaseor, the landowner. With Hip Circle, the city happens to be the owner of the property that they're situated in. I am curious. So if we gave them $25,000, and this would actually make it an even better deal for us, the city, but it seems like we gave them $25,000 to pay for improvements in our building that we own, and then.
Right, in this case, it would have been what is considered a tenant improvement allowance. So in most commercial leases, the landlord will contribute some percentage of the total build out. I don't have that number in front of me, but it was kind of scaled in that way to represent because we had a similar arrangement with Pascal for this Cafe Coralie. Malik was wise enough to do her research and ask for a similar arrangement, and we negotiated that with the previous alderman, and that's how that happened.
Okay, yeah, I do want to make sure we're getting a return on investment. Again, we own the building, so, good here. But, and then lastly, do we keep track of what improvements were made? Do we know exactly what the money was used for? I mean,
Right, so to answer your question, that was the example I gave for Cafe Coralie. It's called a UCC statement, where we document each of the things that were part of that improvement. I would have to look at for example, in the Hip Circle deal, I don't know. We know what they did because we have the permits for what they did for build out. But in this case, I wouldn't say that because the tenant improvements weren't including the permits. So we probably don't have a UCC statement on that because we weren't using money for that.
okay.
So that would be strictly just the build out.
Yeah, I'd just love to see that in the future. But with that, if there are no further questions about this, there was
Did we calculate the equipment into the loan? I know you say there was furniture or something like that in one of the deals, but do we calculate that at all?
The example I gave regarding Cafe Coralie was that they needed, that there was a tenant improvement allowance plus a loan for equipment. The idea was that no bank was going to go to a restaurant alone, and we wanted to fill that space quickly. And Pascal was thriving on Davis Street, and the connection didn't work on Howard Street. So that in that case, we allowed the loan. It was probably not TIP because you can't use TIP to buy ovens, right? So I again had to look at the sources of funds for that.
But
I wish I had a better, stronger brain.
one point though is on the storefront modernization programs, where we would match dollar for dollar. But first they had to bring in 3 bids that we looked at, and then did we change the policy, Paul? But they had to spend the money and then bring the receipt in order to get refunded. So the city was verifying the work was done before we ever fronted. We didn't front money. They brought in the receipt and then it was paid.
Right, I personally took photographs of all the equipment that was purchased. Personally, from a staff perspective, these are really hard to manage, and it truly isn't our expertise, so we don't do a lot of these, and at the time this was happening, it was city-owned property, and we're trying to just get things done, right? And I would argue that that's not our expertise, and we want to do less of that and focus more on the business district-wide initiatives. But again, it all depends on what's happening in the market.
If we can move to a vote now. It's been moved by Councilmember Nusma, second. I think Councilmember Nusma moved to second by Councilmember Nguyen. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes unanimously. Great, thank you. We'll move on next to item D, which is issue a request for proposal for city-owned property located at 727 through 729 Howard Street. Staff request, yeah, so is there a motion for that?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, moved and seconded by Councilman Newsome and Nguyen. Paul, if you have anything on
I'll keep my comments brief.
Yeah.
Here's a picture of the building. Hip Circle is our tenant. There is a long vacant space, 729. I think its last tenant was a storefront church. We had really been, for several years, staff has been wanting to put this on the market there. And I think now's the time. We discussed this with Council Member Reed, and I'll let him speak for himself, but I think we're aligned on this. We do have a lease with Hip Circle that's nearing the end of its first term. I think it was a 5-year term. And then there were 2 additional options. We will find out soon if they want to execute those options. If they do, then they come with the sale, and that's not a bad thing for some retail property owners. They have a tenant already lined up. If they want to not renew the lease, then instantly this becomes a potential development site, or depending on what the RFPs come back as, it could just be retail leased out. But that's our perspective on it. The fact that the prior council member, it was never a high priority at the time for Councilmember Rainey, and it had kind of, it's been in this condition for a period of time. We removed some. There were some unsightly conditions on the building several years ago. Staff removed some signage and other things, and that's it.
I think the brick might have been redone at the bottom there.
At least cleaned, yeah.
I think when the street was repaved. Councilmember Newsome, I definitely want to speak on this.
How did the city come to own this building?
Yeah, it was,
I think during during the recession,
yeah, so post 2008, the city was active in acquiring properties that were available on Howard Street to implement this revitalization, whether it be, there were some city uses, remember, there was the police outpost, and we sold buildings to Ward 8, to Package Pig. So this idea of like the city controlling the future of these sites versus letting them drift into things that
So
were.
it was an active acquisition.
It's an active acquisition with
intent and purpose. We didn't end up with it because it was back taxes or
It's an economic development acquisition.
oh, no, oh, yes, Councilmember Nguyen.
Just to provide a little bit of history, a lot of what was happening on Howard Street was absentee landlords for a long period of time that, and it caused the decline, a lot of decline on Howard Street. There were a number of landlords who just didn't care. They had large enough real estate holdings, they just didn't care whether they leased or not, or to whom they leased. And part of the strategy of revitalizing Howard Street was for the city to gain control of some of these parcels. I can't remember, the first one was a bargain, if I recall. But then if the city controlled them and was able to help businesses start, then that would get the ball rolling in terms of other businesses being willing to come. And we, in the past, we've occasionally had this problem in other places in the city where we have an absentee landlord, large real estate holding. They ask they either don't care very much about their property, so they kind of let it languish, or they ask much too high a rent because they don't understand the Evanston market. And so the property, we've had this happen over years in downtown Evanston, much less now. The vacancies are related much more to economic reasons. But over the years, we have had absentee landlords who, the city has suggested sell the property or lower the rent, but they don't have an economic need, like CVS, or that property owner. So that's how, I don't remember the specifics of how we got 727, but that was part of that. Here's a property coming up for sale, we can purchase it and control it and not let it turn over into just another landlord who doesn't really care very much.
And we might have bought them in foreclosure, because I do remember
Yes.
seeing that they're very small price for it.
Yes, I think,
$78,000, $100,000 for some of them.
yeah, some of them were at very low prices, so.
And how much is it worth now?
I think,
Well, yeah, I would prefer not to, I mean, we've done an appraisal on that.
Yeah,
We're not supposed to say that? Just double it.
more.
We're
Double
not
what
gonna
it is.
we're not gonna set our.
Okay.
this is
Worth
the
whatever we
basic.
can get.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, fair.
I
Well,
mean,
just curious.
Howard Street is a really different street now.
Yeah.
Community, do you have any community centers? I'm just curious on Howard Street.
No, we don't, but I don't think this is the location for communities.
Where's the cross street?
It's Howard between,
Across the
Geez.
street is Chicago.
yeah, well, but it's a few blocks east of Ridge. What is that street there? I should know. That street there, it's Eastwood or it's Elmwood, yeah. Yeah, so I mean, we see where.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm just curious, I'm not, but it does seem like there should be one in the Howard Street area. That would make
In the
sense.
Eighth Ward, yeah, I mean, that's something, that's why, we got another RFP for the recycling center. Okay, great, we're ready to call the March 9th meeting of the Economic Development Committee to order. May I have a roll call
Do we have to do?
for the attendance?
Councilmember Burns,
Here.
Member Ogawa,
Here?
Councilmember Kelly.
Here.
Councilmember Reed,
Here.
Councilmember Wynn. Here. Councilmember Newsom.
Here.
Okay, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Councilmember Nguyen, seconded by Councilmember Newsom. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Moving on to the next item of business. May I have a motion for our first item of business?
Well, we have public comment.
I'm sorry, well, do we have public comments? We have one person
I have
virtually.
one that's in the lead asking questions.
Okay, we'll start with that.
Okay, so, can
Hello?
I ask how many people we have, on the call? Can you introduce yourself?
I'm Chantal Healy.
Is there anybody
I'm
else?
one person, I don't know.
Okay. So, public comment has been called on the agenda. Can you, once again, introduce yourself and share your comment?
Okay, good evening. My name is Chantal Michelle Healy. I'm a resident of Evanston. I live at 315 Davis Street, across the street from the lake. And I also serve on the Evanston Arts Council and Public Art Working Group. And I wanted to offer a comment about the Arlington Lagoon building, about the possibility of having the Cafe Arlington located there. I live directly across the street from it. I've always dreamed of seeing something like that there. I think it would create a great sense of community to have a cafe there. It would have a plaza setting. There would be shared space for people to gather by the lake that is not expensive. It would be outdoors, so that would be safe, particularly if there are any more pandemics or if the pandemic any new variants come back. It's equitable. All people of different socioeconomic backgrounds can enjoy this beautiful setting and have a cup of tea, a glass of water, or a glass of wine. It would not be privileged for the rich, but for everyone in the community. It's humanitarian. The lake needs a place that provides food and water to those who are thirsty or dehydrated, or in need of food after a long walk around the lake, and we don't have any such resources available. This would prevent people from having to leave the area to find food. It would instill a sense of pride and ownership among all the residents of Evanston to bring their friends to sit by a lake. And it would help the economy and help our businesses. It may drive more people to come and visit Evanston, increase tourism, which then could help our businesses in the city. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else on the phone?
Is there anybody else on the call that would like to make a public comment?
Okay, and then I know there's a written public comment. Right,
Yeah, I mean,
sure.
if I could read it, okay, this is from Jeremy Venata at 309 Davis Street. I am writing you in support of
R5 type stuff, or commercial use, mixed use, but that would allow that kind of density.
And then Hip Circle is in there.
Well, no, it's not, but I'm saying allow the kind of height.
Hip Circle is in there currently.
What are you looking at?
Yeah.
Hip Circle is in there currently, their 5-year lease is coming up. And then we think somebody's gonna buy it just to have them in it. Or likely they're not gonna want them.
B3.
It's about 150.
Looking at what we have done here is describe why we would do this, okay? And I think this
I understand how, because I don't want you to go on a thread that I don't know, that I'm not even necessarily looking for, but what I'm saying is, I understand why we're selling it, but likely, they're not gonna want, if there was like multiple tenants, that's one thing, like you see a lot of property listed in that way, like, oh, it's leased up. But typically, people use that term when there's more than one, person that's leasing. Somebody that's probably gonna buy this is gonna wanna use it, I would imagine, unless you're thinking differently, like they're
Well,
gonna.
if I can jump in with part of what my thought is, I mean, I know that Good to Go is interested in potentially buying the building and using it, so what you're talking about.
Okay.
But my vision for the property would be to see if we can get someone who wants to, that if Hip Circle is maybe interested in moving on or come to some agreement, that we'd find someone who would be interested in actually developing the site and adding some residential units above it. Again, not anything higher than what the zoning would allow, but, add some residential above it, and then, and then commercial below. And I think that would make the deal a little sweeter for someone.
And when is the Hip Circle, and I'm just going back to my Hip Circle, because the last discussion we just had was that we gave them a loan, and then their lease is up, and so, we probably want them to continue to stay in business with enough time to pay
Well,
back.
they
the
may,
loan.
sure.
Yeah,
They have to pay it back before they closed out the business, or I presume it's.
they're obligated to pay us,
Okay.
legally obligated, so they
Okay.
have that.
And then I'll also say that we own the building, so the improvements that they made on the building, came back to value for us.
yeah, so whether they pay us back or not, you're saying there's a
They're
value.
gonna pay us back,
Likely,
yeah.
if they don't
Still
resign
value
the lease, we may not get that back, which is fine, but I just think we should realize that this is the same building Hip Circle is in, so.
Yes.
And because it's such a small building, the person who buys it is probably gonna wanna lease it, move in
This
there.
is why you do an RFP on that.
Well,
It's B3, maximum permitted height is 85 feet.
B3.
and so B3 allows for what height?
85 feet. It's a pretty narrow, a small footprint for someone to build 85 feet on.
And I'm sorry, does B3 would allow residential above it naturally, correct?
That's what I'm showing.
Yeah, okay,
And that was the next question, so dwelling, multiple families, special use, dwellings above ground floor is permitted, so you
Yeah.
have first floor commercial, upper floor dwelling units, so that's allowed.
And this is at a tip, right?
Yes, it
It
is.
is.
I mean, we're having the Invest Southwest meeting in a few days. I would recommend that for a site like this, if it's at a tip. We can talk a little bit about that offline, but I think for a site like that, it may be of benefit.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
Bobby, what type of meeting are you having?
I can talk about it more offline, just so, because it's not on the agenda. I'll let you know about it.
Okay.
The only thing that I really would like to see with this, I'd love to see emphasized in the RFP, and certainly looking for feedback from the committee to move that forward, but I'd like to see us give preference or really emphasize, give extra points to someone who comes back with a plan that would add residential units above. And I'd be willing to.
It's an underutilized parcel.
It's an underutilized parcel. It would add to, more faces and heads on the street, more people, I should say, on the street to add to the vibrancy and hopefully safety of the, all of that stuff. as well as make, return on investment for the city. It'd provide more tax revenue as well if there are residential units above in a newer building. And then lastly, I'd certainly be interested in, if someone was adding those residential units, supporting the project with the TIF that is within the district. Sure, Councilmember Wayne.
What is the property to the west? It looks like a parking lot.
Laundromat,
Oh, okay.
and then a parking lot with that
With the
one.
laundromat, okay.
Laundromat owns the parking lot.
Yes,
Is it full you typically, the parking lot?
no,
So there could be something worked out there, right?
private thing,
Got
but
it.
that looks about accurate.
Private, but could
Yeah,
be
we've
publicly
encouraged-
negotiated.
We've encouraged people who are looking at this, a few people that have,
Top of the
Well,
laundromat.
actually, they probably wouldn't because of our parking requirements for laundromats are actually quite high. Because we expect a lot of
So we
people
make
to have
exceptions, very, if it's the right term, but
variance.
you
Okay.
never
The only
know.
thing I would add is just whatever we can do to advance our current initiatives in this proposal, I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I anticipate in the future, our green building ordinance will be more prescriptive about what we require. We can go above and beyond what other code requirements are.
Yeah, Paul, if you could look at the parking, I know that people breeze past that, but trust me, in a place like the Fifth Ward that has terrible parking, it's an issue, for businesses located there. And it's something to look into with the,
What
to
aspect?
see if there's
of-
something that can be worked out, if they're not using it, Then I don't even know if that can be used on both sides, I can't tell.
no.
Is
I
it
think
too
it's
narrow, or is it just,
Just the one
I don't want to
side.
speculate, but, you can look at both of these three sites here and think, well, maybe there's some partnership somebody does if they look at our property and they're like, I'll talk to the laundry, and there's an assemblage of properties so they can do more. You never know what happens in an RFP, we encourage that kind of, and then you get to this, you start.
That
matching up
building
this
is,
building.
what is that? No, that's residential. low.
yeah, it's residential above, and that person might be willing to sell too. That's a separate conversation, but, okay, I think the two asked for certainly I think there's agreement with both Councilmember Newsome and my ask to have cart elevated here, as well as a preference for someone who's going to be residential. Okay, with that, I don't know if we need to formally adopt those, but I think direction is given to staff. So it's been properly moved and seconded to direct staff to issue the RFP. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? None? Thank you. And then finally, or not finally, close to finally, there's E, which is tax increment financing for Custer Avenue.
Here's the rest of it.
And, yep, is there a motion for that?
I will make that motion.
Moved by Councilmember Nusma, seconded by Councilmember Burns. Paul, and we're starting to run out of time.
Yep. Thank you for encouraging me to be short. I want to point out that we are pursuing an up to amount of $50,000 in tax increment financing for the Chicago TIF district to assist with some of the renovations around Custer Avenue, including the east side of the metro track, where you either pay for parking or you go to the heading downtown tracks. The idea here is that we would invest a small portion of trying to get to the sources and uses table that didn't format very well. I think we all need to figure out how to use our system a little better. But we have, here's a picture. This was kind of driven by the businesses along Custer. They're working on a plan that was kind of created in 2018-19 with the Evanston Rural Arts Project or Program with EMAP.
Arts.
Yeah. So the idea here is a mural, some lighting that crosses Custer to help with the evening dining, and then some general infrastructure cleanup and improvements to the area to help make this happen. We're saying an up to amount because we don't know if we will achieve, winning this AARP grant that our transportation mobility coordinator is helping us submit for. And then the Art Council grant is also up in the air for $5,000. So that TIF amount will not exceed 50,000, but the TIF can be used for infrastructure improvements, and some of these things are infrastructure improvements. So I'll stop there. I do want to point out, sorry, Main Dumpster Mile is contributing $39,000 toward the mural, and that's their investment in the area.
Councilman Russo?
I am super supportive of this idea. It really helps build on the positive neighborhood experience that Custer Street Oasis has brought to the neighborhood during COVID. So I know the business owners are excited about this. So it has my strong endorsement.
We've had a lot of meetings on this.
Also, I will mention this. If we're talking TIF money, we had in previous meetings discussed using TIF for cold-and-free foods. Long story short, it looks like that's probably not going to come to fruition.
In the TIF.
It's a TIF.
It's moving off road.
So if we're concerned about husbanding our TIF resources, we've got plenty of money.
Okay. Councilmember Went?
I am in strong support of this as well, that the Oasis was an oasis and continues to be. And anytime we can improve the areas around the tracks, and I think that's a great idea. We've really seen the impact on murals, the effects of murals in terms of changing the feeling of communities. And I would be surprised if there are papers written on that. But I think this is a good use of money. And we're getting a lot of Main Dumpster Miles participating, and there's a lot of different contributions to this. So as someone who supported the TIF when it was started, I think this is a good use of this.
And this will pair very nicely with the Main Street Improvement Project. Phase 2 will be next year, so we get this done, we get the streetscape done, and Main Street is going to be really nice.
And does Metro ever, I mean, what's the parameters of Metro's investment in its surrounding?
Metro has no investment. It would be Union Pacific. They will allow us to do the work, but they're not going to put in any money.
And that's standard,
That's
status
their
quo
answer for everything.
That's why it looks the way it looks.
Yes.
I mean, is there like we tend to this portion, I mean, what is the, like,
If it's likely, if it doesn't have to do with the tracks and the train
that's,
movement,
it's just
we
talking
probably
about the
don't care.
platform, is that pretty much? The platform and the
Well, we have a
bridge?
beautification lease with Union Pacific that runs the extent of Union Pacific throughout Evanston and Howard Street to Isabella. And we are allowed to approve it as long as we fund it and make sure that it follows engineering guidelines, so it's not blocking view corridors for train operators.
So the Union Pacific will have to approve this. They've approved similar projects elsewhere as a matter of routine, so we don't anticipate any hassle there.
I do have I have a few questions. Main Dumpster Mile, where does their funding come from? Is it a chamber?
No, it's an SSA.
Oh, okay, so their funding comes from the city, so,
Yeah.
okay. I will say it does, I mean, when you look at all the funding sources, it really is all the taxpayers of Evanston, no matter how you, the SSA comes from the taxpayers of Evanston, our funds, the TIF fund.
The
Yes, the
SSA
same as
comes
the
from
businesses.
Well, the businesses, well, taxpayers, I
Property
say,
owners.
the taxpayers.
No,
Not
that's
all,
tax-
not all of us.
The
No,
SSA is just
Well,
the property.
yeah, the private, yeah, but they're
Okay.
taxpayers.
But
I mean,
they
people-
voted themselves, they
people don't-
voted.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like a private.
This spoke, that's why, but that's different. It's not just a tax, which is how people would take what you just said.
Okay.
Please continue.
Yes, I mean, okay, taxpayers. So I just want to note that I'm supportive of this too. I go past the area all the time, and I know there are a few bridges and areas in the 8th Ward that really need some loving too, particularly that Howard Street Bridge. If you've driven past that recently, it looks sad. So I support this as well.
And to that point, I hope that we can tap into some federal infrastructure money. This is not the right
Yeah.
venue for that conversation,
No, but
but all of the overpasses and everything.
I would
Yeah.
second, I completely second that. I think to the extent that with the infrastructure money that's there, I'm happy to participate with, in a group meeting of those of us who have these rusty structures. And over the years, I've been part of prior meetings where we actually were able to push hard enough and get from the overpasses, the ones that were in the bottom 10% of safety of all of the CTA projects, gotten money for that from the state to get those done, but we need to just keep lobbying and lobbying and lobbying.
Yeah, and particularly I'm thinking about Howard, we have the new building going up at the corner there, and then right across from that, you have a truly terrible looking bridge. Councilman Burns.
As I said, I don't know if this will be included in the comprehensive plan, but part of the reason why I asked the line of question on Howard is that sometimes a single parcel is not as attractive as like a full plan for redevelopment, right? Like that in and of itself, you just said it was listed on CoStar for a while now, and we didn't get any hits. We may not get any hits even if we do an RFP. And so what the Invest Southwest, like the idea is that we're really taking a look at a whole corridor instead of just one parcel, and making it a much more attractive conversation for developers and community members who might be trying to do something. And so I would even suggest that for this, that let's not just piecemealing it. Like we know we have that whole rail line. Like let's take a comprehensive approach, one and done, and to say what can we do to beautify the whole stretch? Because we always complain about it, right? Like I grew up here, and that's been a long tradition to complain about the state of that thing. So, and I don't know. And again, I don't think the comprehensive plan is going to be a catch-all for all this as much as we want it to be. That's kind of we always fall back on that if we don't want to, plan for it ourselves. We say, oh, well, the comprehensive plan will do. I don't know if it's going to be a catch-all. So hopefully between the, alderman whose ward that line is in, get together and come up with a plan for all of it so we can just improve it once and for all. A long-term plan for it,
And Bobby, I think
because
that
it's not going anywhere.
the way that we have been, we were successful with the 3 viaducts, the 4 viaducts that we did get, was there was an identified pot of money, and it was in Illinois Bill, the last time Illinois was actually solvent. And we worked with Jan Chakowski, all of members of the city council, local state legislators, and met and really concentrated our effort to secure the money for those 3 because we knew it was there. But I think that's something in terms of, because we know this infrastructure money is there, that we put together a campaign. Literally, it's a campaign to secure this money. We were able to use the CTA's own data, which was damning, on those 3 viaducts. And even with that, it took everything to get those 3 done. But there's much more, with the infrastructure bill, there's much more money, but there are a lot of needs. But you're absolutely right. These things have been sitting there. Over the years, they shrug to us and say, well, it's structurally sound. If you don't like the way it looks, then you won't paint it. But, to undertake that, you have to, it's an environmental issue. I think it's like $400,000 or $500,000 per bridge at the last time we looked at this.
I can get in on that too, 'cause I think the line also goes through the new tip, right? Don't we include a portion of it? Yeah. I don't know, so.
Okay.
I can get in on that conversation.
Yes.
Yeah, ready to.
All right, let's keep moving so we can adjourn on time. I want to be known for the committee chair to get us out of here on time. All right, so
We're going to hold you to that.
it's been moved and seconded. That is item, Jesus Christ. Yes, B. E. I don't know. Okay. Sure, that. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? The item has passed. Economic Development Committee membership. We can move through this and economic development reports.
What about 5A?
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, amendment to the geez, okay. Well, we're not doing that today. Amendments to the Entrepreneurship Support Grant Program guidelines. Do committee members mind if we hold this to the next meeting, or are we?
Is there a timeliness issue?
Katie, what's the most urgent need in this grant program amendment that you have identified?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's just, the only amendment was that we were going to open it up to existing and new businesses. It shifted to just existing businesses during the pandemic. I don't think that this isn't urgent.
And I mean, if we get something folks feel comfortable adopting, I just thought we'd want to give it the time if there was discussion on it. If it's a minor change and folks seem fine with it, then we can just adopt it without too much discussion, if that's the only change.
Yeah, the only changes is to open it up to, again, new and existing businesses.
Is there any discussion on this item?
I think it's a good idea.
Fine with me.
Yeah.
What was it, you said new, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was originally a program that was intended for startups and new businesses, and then we shifted it to only existing businesses during the pandemic. So I'm just trying to move it back so that we can open it up to all businesses regardless of startups or existing.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, well then, with that, did we move it? Ma'am?
It's a discussion item anyway.
Oh,
However
okay.
you want to handle it with the rules.
Well, it was for discussion. I mean, it seems as though folks are supportive of the program, so I think move forward, and I guess you'll bring something back that,
We'll mandate.
yeah, okay, so, good. I'm sorry, can I still have a motion for that discussion, just for formality?
I'll move the discussion.
Moved
Second.
and seconded by Councilman Newsman Nguyen, and then that is adopted, that discussion happened. So now we'll move on to item B. That's what I got confused. Item B in number 5. Economic Development Committee membership. One day, I mean, I don't know, you're in the third ward, maybe Alderman Nguyen has done it in a few terms.
Paul's on, Zach.
Yes.
Thank you. I'll take the floor for just 30 seconds. Clearly, our economy's changed a lot, and the way we're reviewing the projects, I think one of the experiences we had with member Jean Lindwall, who is in her private life or previously was an economic development professional, and she served as the planning commission person, but really her role ended up being this economic development professional. And I think it was really helpful during her tenure to have her, especially during the downturn. We have you as an economist, coincidentally, but you're a member at large. And then we had a member who left. He was also an at-large member, but was also a business owner. So what I started realizing was that it's probably time to change our committee membership to change those kind of at-large and bring in somebody from the MWBE committee, because we talk a lot about workforce development in this setting, but we also talk a lot about underserved communities and issues around kind of lower income challenges and things with startup businesses who need that additional assistance. And I feel like somebody who's a little more focused on those issues through MWBE could be our liaison, committee liaison. We in my 10 years here, I don't think we've ever dealt with the land use issue. And in economic development, maybe ancillary because obviously a use is on land, but really, if you recall over the years, the ZBA person and generally the planning commission person were generally really quiet on the committee. They didn't offer a lot, and so what I was really realizing is what we were experiencing with Ms. Lindwall was something else. I lied, I spoke for probably 2 minutes, and I apologize for that. But that's the mindset here. And because the planning commission has changed in our code, it's now land use commission and the ZBA dropped off. Now's the time to make the change, and we have to update the ordinances, which one is already drafted and ready to go to the city council, depending on what you want to see.
This is a discussion.
Yep.
I would have some thoughts, but I'm not ready right now, but in between these meetings, I can provide some feedback. But I mean, I'm following the logic.
I have been on this committee for a long time. I do think that it's been helpful when we've had a small business owner on the committee to give us that perspective. I do think that the advantage of an economic development professional, occasionally there's been some overlap from the plan commission on that person, and when they've been active on the committee, it's been very helpful. MWD, as Paul said, those are issues that we are talking about all the time. But of course, the environment board. So I like all of these. I think if I were to sort of put my preference, I'd say 3, 1, 2, and 4. And if you can combine it into somebody, that would be great. You know, maybe overlap with MWD and a small business owner, that might be an overlap.
We could add all 4, we could do, it doesn't have, there's no rule about, I mean, there is technically a rule, but as we redesign this committee, we could add or shrink membership as well. So.
I would just, I think by adding members, we end up having problems with quorum when we do that. So I think I would be careful about how many we add.
Especially the further away we get from economic development. If we have somebody from the environment board, that's kind of a different mindset, and it might be hard to find the person who's into what we do here. Although I appreciate the thought, sure.
Well, I was gonna say, it could be somebody just involved in, an environmentalist, CG, or it doesn't have to be from the board, I'd say.
I also think it makes sense, I can take maybe very small quibble with terminology. I would use the term at large when it doesn't apply to something specific. And so I would like to have, I think it makes sense to have just an at-large community.
Yeah.
And that's open for whoever, somebody who might not be coming from a background,
I think that's
have the ability to, yeah. Well, you count as, your professional background.
Yeah.
Right, and then you could say liaison from the MWD.
And then liaison.
Yeah, and, and that could also be like the plan commission and zoning members where it's, I don't remember the terms, how long the term they serve, but they participate with us for 2 years and then they roll off, and then somebody else from the MWD participates. So it's not a 4-year commitment. They could even decide it was like a 1 year that they join us, and then they roll off, and then somebody else from MWD.
Or maybe we could just structure it as they send us whoever they want.
They want, yeah, but you want continuity.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do think the advantage of having a liaison from the advisory board is it's somebody who is tuned into the other issues that are coming before, coming out of that board, that are focused in on some of the city goals.
Yeah. It would be
It could
great.
go
It'd be
either
great.
Yeah. There might be, yeah, there might be someone who doesn't have the time for the environment board, but is still would be a great person to have on there.
Okay, with that, if there's no further discussion, I'll just add that I think combining, I think Councilmember Nguyen said this, I think combining, one, I agree, I think we should have just one at-large member and just leave that open to any resident. And I think for the rest of them, we could say that, 3 at-large members, how many, and you'd be one of those fitting into one of these categories, right? And so we'd be adding maybe 2 more people or 3 more people. The committee size now is 9, correct, or 10?
Has to be an odd number.
It's correct, oh,
I think we have.
It should be an odd number.
1, 2,
We always
3,
said
4, 5,
it.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10 with a
We have
3 vacancies.
So 3
Okay.
vacancies.
so 10 including the vacancies. Okay,
We're missing ZBA, we're missing Plan Commission, we had one person who resigned. And Scott is the 4th, plus the
5
6
council
members.
members. Oh, 6
So how
council
we end up with
members,
10?
shucks.
Not here.
Yeah, I forgot Peter was on the committee as well.
Yeah, so I don't know how we got to 10, if it was the last rules committee, when you all.
Yeah, it might have been that, or maybe
So
not.
I think we just add a council member.
I think we added a council member. Okay, well, I think we should try to, if we're at 10 now, there really, as far as OMA, is a difference between 9 and 10. And so either we keep it at 10 or we drop down 2 members to 8, or just keep it at 10, or 9. Or,
Wait, we're 10 now without the vacancies. Wait,
Our structure is 10.
Our structure is 10.
10, and
3 of
3 of
those
those
are
are
vacant.
Then let's keep it at 10. I think that's.
We've had as many as 11, as I recall. but-
Yes, I think we have, but I think 10, so then a quorum is 6.
yes, by council, yes. Okay, so then, yeah, I think, so then we have 6 council members, and then we have 4 other spots that can be filled by people, so we've, I think we can say one of those spots, in my opinion, but one of those spots would be filled by a community member, an actual at-large person, who could be anybody, and then the other 3 slots, one of which is already filled, so the other 2 vacancies would be filled by someone who, I think we can combine those into, maybe one, so just say that it's either someone from the MWEB community or committee, or, all those other things, small business owner, and that way it leaves it open, and even environment board, that we can, if there isn't someone from MWEBE that is, gonna serve on this committee, then we could flip them out, we can flop them, and so it leaves us a lot of flexibility, and so we don't have the issue that we're kind of stuck in now, where we need to find somebody from a committee just to meet quorum.
But the reason, so if I may, the reason that we're stuck in this now is because the plan commission was,
Yeah.
you know the reason, right? So we
Yeah.
lost, ZBA doesn't exist, plan commission changed. Technically, land use commission could appoint somebody to serve on this committee today, and that's what we would kind of live with, because that's the successor group. What I was trying to do, just for clarification, is to make sure that we had a similar arrangement that technically worked from during my tenure here for 10 years, is that you have somebody always from the MWB committee who cycles in, and they can decide how they appoint the person. And when that person is done with their term, they just appoint somebody else. We've never had an issue with quorum with them until this occurrence happened. And to carry on with your idea, you could then merge 2, 3, and 4 into one.
Yeah.
Unless we wanted an environment board, then you merge 2 and 3. Then you pick people that have the qualities, members at large that meet.
I think 2, 3, and 4 merging those together makes sense, because it gives us that flexibility if there isn't someone on the environment board that wants to.
So would we call them 3 at-large members and have like a job description?
Well, we'll call them 3 members who fit whatever this criteria is, I think. But that would eliminate the at-large member from the community.
But this is so broad.
I mean, it is, yeah, fairly
Each of
broad.
them would, if there's just an at-large member from the community, what would their characteristics be, right? Scott's a member of the community. He wasn't, the mayor chose him because,
I think that's all I have.
right, but he happens to be an economist, and I think that's why he was chosen. And I think Ms. Gallagher was chosen because she was a business owner. And in the past, we've had, Heck Powell, rest in peace.
Who's on this committee?
Yeah, he was.
Okay.
There's, the environment board's meeting tomorrow, I could ask them to put it on their agenda for discussion.
So for the purposes of this meeting, we're discussing it, but you'll have to, when you have your council meetings about this,
Yeah.
remember how this informed that conversation, because that's when the action will be taken.
Yeah, Councilmember.
And I don't know if this needs to be its own thing, but I think, to me, the most important person is somebody who's an experienced urban planner, economic development professional. Like, that's who I'm looking for. 'Cause I didn't realize this. It was just like council members, appreciate the economists, but I'd love to see like an economic development professional helping to enhance what we're doing here. Otherwise, we're just a bunch of amateurs.
I like small business.
Playing, well, it's definitely small business. I mean, those are the two that I would really want, right? Like
Small
an
business.
actual existing business owner, and then also a visionary, like somebody that's in the professional space, that's maybe big time doing most of the work in Chicago, so we don't have to worry about them trying to apply for things here, although that they could. But, that's what I'm looking for to help guide what we're doing. So I want to call attention to that in this. And I see we have it says experience urban planner, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if that should be our own thing, but.
Deacon was one of those people.
Yeah.
And,
Promise, and Miss Linvall, Miss
and
Schweiger.
and I will say, at Lisa Deacon, and her time on this committee, which I think extended before you all joined, excellent. I mean, the questions she asked were really very, very good, very probing.
Right, yeah.
From her expertise, which, as I agree with you, probably we don't have. And I do agree with Jean Linvall, her economic development professional and urban planning skills were really helpful during her time, especially during the pandemic, I should say, during the last 2 years.
So if that's what we're suggesting, like one that's just, like, let's try to get somebody that fits into one of those, a small business person and then something that includes either MWB or Environment Board, I mean, I'd be supportive of that. But I think those two are what I'm looking for. Because I think every committee, every environmental, the Environment Board should weigh in, I think, on everything we do, whether it's through the Environment Board or CarePrac. So I don't necessarily need that person to sit on the committee. I just think everything we do should go through that lens. But those are the two people that we need to, at this point, recruit, right? Those two folks to sit on this committee like now. And then, we can find a way to run our decisions through the Environment Board potentially if there's something that's of interest.
Sure. And I also want to note that at least 3 of the members here also serve on the MWEBE committee.
Right,
So
exactly.
you're, oh, right.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Just to note that.
It would not be a council member, it would.
Yeah, I know it wouldn't be a council, I know it wouldn't, but I'm just saying that we do have a connection
Right.
from that committee already.
And careful we don't get too prescriptive and design
Sure.
ourselves into a corner. Set up
Well, then we have to
structure.
come back.
Yeah.
Right.
And then lastly, I'm curious, how do we define, I sometimes feel like, especially we in government, get kind of, or jiggles about small business owners, but also why don't we include I want to see someone who has like maybe 100 employees,
Sure.
medium business owner.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, I have an answer for that, because I'm, in my mind, I'm thinking our focus for the next, if we eventually have time to have the conversation about a work plan, it's all kind of baked into the ARPA plans that we're going to be discussing, but the economic development component of it really is about business district recovery. It's going to be all we're talking about for the next 2 years. And I think of those business districts as being the small, call them the mom and pops. But I could definitely, I'm open to the idea that we do have large office users in downtown Evanston that have, I think of,
Well, I even think about we've had a lot of projects come, at least in my time, where we're not talking about tiny small businesses like a bake shop, we're talking.
Like from Jewel, I'd love to have somebody who really represented large business too.
Yeah,
Really speak to-
maybe that'd be interesting too, but yeah, but,
Evanston based.
yeah, Evanston based is what I'm really,
Right.
yeah, I don't know if I can do it, but a larger business to me
But they
is,
don't listen on the third, on Chicago Avenue.
yeah.
They might listen on Howard Street, but
No.
they don't listen.
Okay, so I think we kind of got everybody's feedback here, and this will be going to council next. I think it'll incorporate some of that feedback, maybe.
we'll try to, when we put a cover memo on
However
the
you-
ordinance, we'll try to incorporate some of the language used
Yeah.
to help guide the conversation.
Okay, and then lastly is the economic development report. I don't know if you guys if you all give a presentation on this, or if it's just something we
Sure,
do.
we just read.
Yeah.
Traditionally, there's, council members will
Data
point
rich.
out things that, we report on, and change that if you want to in the future.
Okay, is there anything particularly that you all think we need that you want to highlight here publicly, or for our vast audience? People watch on.
They'll watch it
Yeah,
later when it's recorded. Now, I think our number one, from our perspective, the number one announcement has been just the revitalization of the movie theater development. That's just going to make a major change and really pulling people back.
Well, can you give us a rough timeline on that?
Sure. And also, we released the business district implementation plan, RFP, the strategy
Yes.
plan. I sent that to all of you. Regarding the movie theater development, there are a number of things happening. One, the owner of the property believes that the movie theater will be open before Memorial Day. That's a real kickoff to
Series?
the movie season. And lease negotiations are ongoing and close to being signed, and this is their kind of standard responses for the e-gaming arena concept out of Britain that has an American outpost. There is a golf concept called Top Golf. It's a smaller version of the ones in the other suburbs. Terra and Vine has vacated the space. They're no longer, they had a good run, but she's focused on a project in Chicago, and Top Golf is taking some of that space. And also a trampoline.
taking some of the Terravine space?
Yeah, they'll
Terravine.
use the event space as kind of the golfing area, and then there's the bar that's attached to it would be the kind of drinking part of that.
Never been inside there,
To
but
the top, there won't be a restaurant there, because last time I talked, I can't remember who you introduced me to, but that gentleman, nice. They were trying to find a restaurant, so they're doing a golf concept now?
The back spaces, which were kind of larger event spaces, are going to be the top golf simulator experience
Okay.
attached to the bar, so you can drink.
What about food though? I mean,
It'd be bar food.
bar,
Yeah, it's not going to be a
it
restaurant.
won't be a restaurant as well. Okay.
Now, will they convert the other remaining space to a restaurant? Possibly. They're negotiating with other restaurants.
That space is huge when
Yes,
you go
it's
back
really
into
big,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I've been in there either.
If you go,
Yeah.
if you went back and back and back, you know,
Oh, it's
because it's
massive.
in the corner.
And it was all Terraline was there.
Yeah.
I
So
know
I-
there's Wolfgang Puck.
Yeah.
Correct.
I cut Paul off. I don't know if he was done.
I've done blabbing about it. I mean, it's all, Seidenberg's gone, but he reported it.
Okay, so my other question, I just have a quick one, is, so I've heard from people who are sad about losing the cine arts, the art films. And, you know, and as, right, and I, as, got my gray beard here, as someone who was on the council when we negotiated with the movie theaters, and this may be too old a concept for you guys, one of the problems we had, because we definitely wanted sort of those independent films, that type of, you know, small release, and we started calling them art films, which you all are way too young to realize, well, Jonathan gets it. Art films is just a polite word for pornography.
Oh,
Back in the day when it was in, do you remember the Tornet Theater? Anyone remember the Tornet
Yep.
Theater? Claire does. When we bought our house, they were showing a XXX film there on Chicago Avenue. So the city council was in this, we were having trouble figuring out how you define those independent films, the films that go to Sundance, the films, I don't even know. So they said that they would bring, I don't remember what the language ended up being, but it wasn't art films, because they were like, you all don't want art films. Yes, actually, that is what we want. No, we don't want art films. And they're like, our company does not show art films. And they're like, wait, what?
indie films, I think is what they
Yeah, now it's indie.
Yeah.
Now that term, but that term in the, you know, meanwhile, indie films. So, could you
Right.
tell us something that we can reassure our,
Well, this is what I can tell you as of this morning. I followed up with the property owner, and I asked the question, is AMC planning art films in the space?
You actually-
I used the language.
see now, actually it's no longer because, you know, because you can just dial it up on your own. You don't need to dial art. You can
And
get
of
art
course,
films on your own home.
And I say there seems to be demand for that, so now I'm making a right, so he says, they will show, so here's his response. They will show the wide mix of movies, including those types of films.
Yeah, they really need to have 12 movie theaters, I'm sorry, but one of those needs to be designated.
So it's 18 theaters,
Yeah.
now it's down to 12, and that's the way the market is.
But they'll all be big. They will all be the same size.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm not, yeah, and I don't know if they're doing the leather seats and all that stuff. He said they took the keys yesterday to the space and will start getting ready to open soon. I did see two, like Coca-Cola trucks out there today that were like big work trucks. They weren't like delivery trucks. So I'm thinking
They're
like
out there.
symbolically they're already putting in the money-making beverages into the space. We'll see. I appreciate something Council Member Kelly had talked to me about recently, which is let's see if we can push them harder to do something there. So we're on it. I want to say that. Right now I don't have an angle in terms of leverage for that. They're going to come in for signage, you know, so you know, maybe there's a way we can twist a little bit.
Well, I think we have the data to show them, like our, you know, whatever the,
Was there a separate tax for the,
no,
Okay.
it was the same. And, you know, it crept over. There were times when the big releases, you know, we were crept over onto the other side. But, you know, I think showing them whatever demographic data that we have that shows, look, these are the people who go see the indie films, and you will have a market here. Once again, it's just demonstrating to them that, like we did with Trader Joe's, we're all shopping at your store, you know, and Glenview, just, you know, we're your customers. So it's the same idea that, you know, who do you think goes to these films? Well, we are, you know, at least 1/12 of this could be that.
And I think university towns, and just see that those
Yeah.
are, that's the market. I mean, it's just so, I mean, it's
There's
not.
another potential leverage point, we can talk about this as time goes on, but, they're probably gonna come back at some point to renew some kind of parking agreement with us. So let's make sure we keep this on the front burner, I intend to do that. They're also gonna come in for signage, I'd encourage them to think of a new way to, maybe this becomes the Evanston Theater, with the big word Evanston, AMC across the top. I don't prescribe stuff like that, but it could be like a new kind of background for selfies, if you're standing in downtown Evanston, you get the Evanston behind you.
That's a
People
good
like
idea.
that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's what we used to call on Roundup. I feel like
I was called
On Central Street, those were Evanston.
it was something, I feel like I've
There's
said that
lots
since
of
the other
things.
thing.
So,
Maybe
Right.
I'm
again, a lot of it is just ideas, like they don't really need to listen to us, but putting pressure on them for whatever we
You know,
can.
they want to make money, and, and we want them to be successful. And here's a good way to make money for a university community.
Right.
What year does Century come in? When did Century come in?
I have to answer that.
Century came in, yeah, I was,
Oh,
When did the movies
it
open?
was, we approved it.
it had to be two.
I'm not, well, we approved it in like 97, 98, and then maybe,
It was Century all back then, or different, right? Different.
it was Century.
Oh, Century,
Yeah,
that's
I mean, yeah, and that whole blade sign that, that they have, that was part of a whole package of signage. They really wanted to make sure they had that, that old fashioned sign, like, that, which now is.
I want to say 2003.
2000, it's probably 2003, actually, mine are fuzzy, small children.
So,
Yeah, I
do we
think
think
that-
we'll be able to see a movie before the end of the year there, or what's?
Well, he
just-
said, your words, yeah,
He said Memorial Day, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
yeah, he's pushing hard for,
Okay, great.
yeah, sorry, AMC's pushing hard because it's a big money in the season, summer and Christmas.
We kind of got cut off at this point, but Sky Zone also, I'm happy that it's going to become a lot more family friendly too. Because I don't think any family will make it that. I think that's important, but I also want to highlight that it was important to me, and I talked about this during the campaign, that it became more family friendly downtown, that it would attract people from the neighborhoods, and that's certainly something that folks in my kind of age group with small children are really excited about, so I'm happy about
You
this.
know, I'm family friendly, man.
Careful, family friendly. Hold on.
Absolutely, there
Yeah,
are wide
happy
range of
about
films, so
No, I'm
you give
excited,
families
yeah.
downtown,
Yeah.
families in the evening can feel like this is a
Exactly,
great place to
exactly.
go, yeah.
And the theater might have been as open as early as 2002, because I distinctly remember going to see Spider-Man with my mom at that theater,
Yes,
and
that-
Passion of
yes.
Christ there as well. I don't know if I should have mentioned Passion of Christ. at that
One of the world, I guess,
Yeah. I will say, and this AMC, I know AMC is doing dynamic pricing, so maybe we can bring them in to talk about dynamic pricing for parking as well. Yeah,
Okay, let's see.
joking about that, but they are doing dynamic pricing.
I think they should, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, with that, I think we've discussed everything on our agenda with no further business before us. This committee is adjourned. We took exactly 2 hours, although we started a little late, and we'll try to get on time the next time.
Yeah, we had a lot of-